It's Monday, but this is no joke. It's time for another episode of Monday Musings. Let's get started. So welcome back to the channel, everybody. For this episode of Monday Musings, I thought it would be appropriate to talk about Detective Comics issue 1000, which came out this week, the landmark 1000th issue, 96 pages of story wrapped in this book and multiple covers. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about all the stories. And before I just get into it, I want to say the hype for Action Comics 1000 was huge because it was the first comic series to reach that milestone number, and now Detective is the second. And for all the fanfare that Action got, I was only really impressed with a couple of the stories. So with Detective, I'm going to say overall, I thought it was a much better put together book, and I enjoyed more of the stories in this book than I did in Action. So let's try to break this down. The first story is called Batman's Longest Case, and it's by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, and it's about this case that has been going on for a long time with Batman. It's this and not to spoil it, but it's this case. He's been tracking down clue after clue, year after year, and he finally gets to the end of it, and it's not what he thought it was going to be. So it's a really interesting story, and Scott Snyder's Batman, it's like it was hit and miss for me, but when it was really good, it was really good, you know. And I think that this story was pretty solid. It was a great opener. It fit into that whole mythos of the Batman, and it gave you an unexpected ending and this little twist that kind of could lend itself to future stories. So I thought it was a pretty good story. The next story was called Manufacturer for Use by Kevin Smith and Jim Lee. And this story was about a man trying to track down some kind of obscure item that was used in a crime, and he comes across this gift shop, and throughout it you see a montage of Batman fighting different people, and what it ends up being is very sentimental is the wrong word, but it's the best word I can think of at the moment. But it's meaningful. It's meaningful to Batman, and he procures this item, and he does something really interesting with the item. So this was another really solid story. First two stories I'm impressed with. I'm excited about this, and I'm like, okay, this is really cool. Where can we go from here? Then we get The Legend of Newt Brody by Paul Dini and Dustin Nugent. And this was an interesting story. It's all about this henchman that all the villains hate, and he keeps messing up everything. And so you go through this documentary talking about this Newt Brody guy and how he's messed up everything, and there's a twist at the end that is really funny and really fits into Paul Dini's kind of style and everything. And I thought it was a fun little story. The art wasn't as strong, but it really fit the tone of the story. So again, 3 for 3 as you're starting off this epic 1000th issue. Next we get Warren Ellis and Becky Cloonan on the Batman's design. Now this story, no secret, I'm not a huge Warren Ellis fan. I've never been able to get into his work at any stage. I think the closest thing that I ever got into of his was Next Wave from Marvel. So I'm not the hugest Warren Ellis fan. So that has something to do with it. But this story was okay. Batman was tracking down this group of criminals, and he had done his homework, and he had studied each one of them, and he had this elaborate plan to take them all down in this warehouse that he led them to. And I like the systematic flow of it. I like the fact that Warren Ellis kind of reiterated that Batman doesn't use guns and guns are stupid. I like that. So, it was a pretty cool story as well. And so there's a Warren Ellis story that I was a fan of. Now, there was only 2 stories in here that I really was like, I could have lived without those. And this is one of them. And I hate to say it because it's by a comic veteran, comic genius, Denny O'Neil, with art by Steve Epting. So 2 great comic superstars here, but I wasn't really into the story. It's called Return to Crime Alley, and it's the night of the death of the Wayne's parents. Of course, many years into the future. It's in the present setting, and Leslie Tompkins is there, and Batman's there, and some kids decide to have some not so healthy fun, and Batman is a little harsh, and there's like this life lesson that Leslie's trying to teach Batman, and I wasn't feeling it. I thought it came off like Batman was the villain here, and he had some deep psychological problems, which we know that, but in the 1000th issue that's supposed to celebrate the Caped Crusader, it seemed a little out of place for me. The next one was the other one that I didn't like too much, and it was called Heretic by Christopher Priest and Neil Adams. And I'm going to just put it out there, I'm not a fan of either one of these guys. I know Christopher Priest and Neil Adams both have a huge fan base, and I've never been the hugest fan of Neil Adams' artwork. I respect it. I respect all he's done. And Christopher Priest, I respect what he's done with certain characters. I cannot stand his Deathstroke. And this story is written just like Deathstroke. Even the lettering style and the little black bar captions with these one-word things, or a little phrase or whatever. It's just his signature style, and I'm not a fan of it. I don't like the way it plays out. This story is, they're trying to figure out who killed someone that kind of had a Thomas and Martha Wayne card in their pocket, and it's supposed to lead back to Batman and kind of give him a clue as to somebody that's after them because of some wrong that was done, and who it involves. It's like, it's predictable and at the same time confusing and kind of very on the surface kind of story. So this was probably the poorest story in the entire book, but that's saying something, because even it had its positives. You got to see a villain that definitely should be in this book. You had Neil Adams returning to Batman for the fans of Neil Adams' work on Batman, and so that was pretty cool in and of itself. And if this is the worst that this book has to offer, then it's still a pretty dang good book, in my opinion. So the next story is called I Know, and it's by Brian Michael Bendis with art by Alex Maleev. And I gotta say, I'm usually not a fan of this pairing. I'm not usually a fan of Maleev's artwork, especially compared with Bendis's writing. But this story, I felt like they were just on point. And this story was set in the future. Bruce Wayne is old and gray, and he's approached by an old and gray Penguin who claims that he's known Bruce Wayne's identity, or Batman's identity, for many, many years. And they have this conversation, and it plays out with flashbacks as to how he knows and what the repercussions of that is. And he just wanted Batman to know that he knew. And the way that it comes about at the end, Penguin doesn't get exactly the response that he was hoping for. So it was a really clever, really fun story with actually really striking art that really fit the theme of the story. So I actually like that one a lot. The next one we got is The Last Crime in Gotham. This is by Jeff Johns with art by Kelly Jones. And I have to take my words back. I wasn't a huge fan of this story either, so there were three. I'd forgotten about this one. I am like a huge Jeff Johns mark, specifically with his DC stuff. I love his work in DC. I wasn't a huge fan of this story, and Kelly Jones' art, I just was not feeling it at all. It looked like a pseudo Frank Miller Dark Knight kind of style, but with kind of goofy proportions. And the coloring was a little bit garish for me as well. I just was not a fan of this. It seemed like all the characters were older. It seemed like Batman and Catwoman were together, and they had a grown daughter named Echo. This was all on the first pages of the story. Damian's there, and they have a new ace, and they're all trying to solve this crime of these 12 people at a party wearing holiday sweaters that were all dead. And so it's a short, simple little story with simple deduction, but it made Damian sound like an unsure, not as smart as he is kind of character. And when he's older, he should be even cockier, I think, or even more sure of himself. Because right now, at his young age, he's like, he knows what he's talking about. He thinks he's the smartest person in the room. But here he's like, is that right, Dad? it didn't fit. It didn't feel like Damien at all to me. It felt completely out of character. And again, it was a very simple plot, and the meaning behind it, it didn't click for me. So, then we had The Precedent by James Tynion IV and art by Alvaro Martinez Bueno. And this was a story about Alfred talking to Bruce about bringing Dick Grayson into the family, and Bruce having his doubts, and Alfred kind of walking him through things. And it was a touching story, and it kind of set the tone of who Dick Grayson is, and it was fun in that way. And I liked that he was in on it the whole time, and he kind of convinced Batman to look at things differently, like Dick Grayson normally does. So I thought that was pretty nice. And then we had Tom King, current Batman writer, with art by Tony S. Daniel and Joel Jones. And this was a very beautifully illustrated drawing. Beautifully illustrated story that brought together the entire Bat family, which was really cool. They were all called to a rooftop, and I'm talking everybody. I'm talking all the Robins, Signal, Batgirl. You had Spoiler was there, Catwoman was there. You had Helena was there. Let's see, I can't think of her name. But you had her there. You had Cassandra. You had Batwoman. Everybody was there, and it was really cool. And they were through the whole thing. You're seeing pictures of Bruce Wayne visiting a grave, and you're having this off-panel conversation between all these people on this rooftop, and they're just trying to speculate, what in the world are we doing here? And Jason's like worried he's getting kicked out of the family, and Signal's worried it's something he's done, and so on and so forth. It's interesting. You have this back and forth with Barbara and Dick, which was fun. And then Batman finally shows up, and he doesn't say a word. He just makes a motion, and they're like, oh, that's what this is. And you get this really, really nice ending with, that's not even an ending. You get this really nice thing that happens, and it's like, oh, that was pretty cool and really fitting, and it's going to make a really nice image on the internet and everything. And then you get this nice little ending as it kind of puts a capstone on where Batman is with this makeshift family that he has created. And then finally you get some pinups that you get to look at, and then you get one final story to close out the book. And this one is called Medieval, and it is by Peter J. Tomasi and Doug Monkey. And you're getting this whole dialogue. It's like a declaration almost. It's almost like a manifesto, as you're seeing these captions, and it's going over Batman basically taking out his aggressions on different villains and stuff. And this voice is like echoing and saying how Batman steps over the line and exhibits cruelty and aggression, and there needs to be a brighter force in Gotham. And then you get a pretty cool reveal at the end that I was kind of geeking out about, and I'm excited about it because it's going to continue next issue. And I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. I gotta admit, I'm excited about that. So I'm happy with where that's going, because it brought the stuff that's been going on over there in Detective. It brought it to a head, and it's kind of like, okay, I can live with that now. What we endured through Detective, so that was pretty cool. So all in all, I thought Detective Comics 1000 was a fantastic issue, a great landmark issue with a ton of stories that were fantastic. Just 2 or 3 that weren't so great, but they still weren't the worst stories I've ever read, And for an issue of this caliber, this is what I expected Action Comics to be, and I didn't quite get that out of Action Comics 1000. So Detective Comics 1000, I thought hit the mark, hit the nail on the head, however you want to say it. This was a fantastic book. Was it perfect? No. Was it darn good? Yes. For one of these anthology kind of books that we see all the time with the 80-page giants and things like that, there's usually a bunch of stinkers in these, and then 1 or 2 really good stories. This one was like 70-30. It was that good. It was a really good issue, and I'm really impressed with it. And it's got me excited for a few things coming up in the Batman, this side of the DC universe. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on Detective Comics 1000, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, if you like this video, please hit the subscribe and notification bell so you get updates on all the content going up to this channel. And if you can follow me at Brant Fowler on Facebook and Twitter, at Last Number Press on Instagram. And of course, we'll be talking more about this book on Frontline Live tomorrow night, so tune in for that over on Comic Frontline. So until then, thanks for watching. Be good.